Hi guys, this is Peter here, and today I'm going to talk about part one of the IELTS speaking exam. We're going to look firstly at an overview on what happens in part one. We're then going to talk about what the examiner is looking for and listening for you to do in part one, which of course is extremely important for you to both understand and be able to do. So let's start with a brief introduction of part one. Part one will last about 4 to 5 minutes, which really translates as about 12 questions on 3 different topics, and taking, as I mentioned, 4 to 5 minutes, which is not a long time. It's pretty quick, it's a short time. So it's important, it's critical that everything runs smoothly during this time, and you shouldn't be taking long to answer any of the questions. When you're answering a part one question, if the examiner interrupts you, just stop and let the examiner ask the next question. It usually just means the examiner is watching the clock and wants to get through 3 topics, 12 questions in 4 to 5 minutes, and that will not affect your score. So again, getting back to an overview of part one, there's 2 things part one is designed to do. Firstly, it's testing your basic grammar. Basic grammar as in simple present tense, simple past tense, simple future tense, and possibly mixed tenses also. Number 2, the part one is testing your basic vocabulary. And this is important to understand. In the exam, in a speaking exam, we generally don't need very advanced or complicated vocabulary. So what I mean by basic grammar is, if the examiner, for example, asked you, do you like watching movies or films? I think every student should understand the word film or movie, but can you name 4, 5, 6 different kinds or types of movies? For example, romantic movie, action movie, documentary, comedy, horror, and so on. That's the basic grammar or lexical resources about movies. So basic grammar and basic vocabulary. Another very important thing in part one is keeping everything natural and speaking naturally. And again, this is important for part 1, 2, and 3. So not giving the examiner a long list of memorized or recited answers. That's important. Please don't do that. Remember and memorize key words for your answers, but not the entire answer. Keep it natural or your score will be lowered. Not maybe, it will be lowered. That's important. And examiners are very good at detecting memorized sentences. It's part of their job and they must punish you for doing it. So again, keep things naturally. Definitely study and memorize keywords, key vocabulary, possibly some short phrases, and that's it. Okay, let's move on and look at some style of questions in part one. And the more familiar you get with part one topics and part one questions, and this is the same throughout the speaking exam, but now we're just looking at part one. You'll see a theme. You'll see how so many question forms and the grammar form, no matter what the topic, is similar. So we're going to start with direct questions. Very simple, very basic. And this is probably how your speaking exam is going to start. It's going to start with a direct question. For example, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the first topic in part one will be one of 4 of the compulsory topics. Usually, or most often, it's talking about your studies if you're a student, or your work if you're working. The other 3 or your hometown, the area you live in, and your home, as in the building you live in. So let's have a look at an example of a direct question. If the examiner starts with studies and work, the first questions they're going to ask you is, are you a student or are you working? Or it could be just, are you a student? Are you working? That's a direct question. I mean, it's going to be a yes or a no answer, or basically, or usually, a yes or a no answer. Let's look at what not to do. Are you a student? Answer, I'm studying e-commerce in university at the moment. Now, with that question, or that, more importantly, that answer, the examiner can rightly say, I asked, are you a student? I didn't ask, what are you studying? So first of all, this is important in part 1 and again in part 3. First of all, answer the question. Are you a student? Yes, I'm a student. Now we can follow that up with some extra information, which of course we should do, as in just, yes, I'm a student is too short an answer. So again, are you a student? Yep, I'm a student. I'm currently studying e-commerce in university. Good answer. You directly answered the question and added a little more information. And for a basic direct part 1 question, that answer is long enough. Let's look at some more examples of direct questions. Do you like sports? I play football every day. I love football. Now again, that was a direct question. Do you like sports? The answer I used was I play football every day. Again, the question was not what sport do you play? The question was, do you like sports? So again, that can only be a yes or a no. Yes, I do. No, I don't. So let's look at the question again. Do you like sports? Yes, I actually love sports. I play football every day and I often play basketball too. So yeah, I really, really like sports. So you can see again, it's a direct question. I started my answer with a direct answer. Yes, I do. Then I added information. I like to play football every day. I also play basketball sometimes. I really love sports. That's something else to look at. I'm keeping it natural. I'm speaking almost like I'm talking with a new friend. And that's how you should be speaking in the IELTS exam. Not speaking like a monotonial robot. Yes, I like sports. I play football. Sometimes I play basketball. I like sports. Ugh! Terrible, horrible, very unnatural. The examiner will be going to sleep. So let's, instead of saying I like, let's raise a level. I love sports. I'm crazy about sports. I live for playing sports. Much more natural, much more fluent, and very easy to do. Keep everything positive is a great idea in part 1. You're making, or you're giving the examiner your, that first impression, which of course is important. The examiner or the IELTS examiner is not a robot. They're not a computer. They're a human being. They like if things are positive. They want to see you smile. They want to see you enjoying yourself, wanting to talk to them. So again, that's something to think about. And it's also something we'll look more at in a later podcast. Now, moving on, as I said, we looked at direct questions. We talked a little about basic grammar and basic vocabulary. Another thing the examiner is listening for you to do and waiting for you to do in part 1 is use some complex sentences. And again, if you want to score a 6 or above a 6 in the speaking exam, this is a must, and it's something you should be starting in part 1. You must do it in part 2, you must do it in part 3. And by a complex sentence, of course, I mean really basically just joining shorter sentences together using a linking word. For example, if I was asked, where do you come from? And I answered, I come from Dublin. It's the capital city of Ireland. It's a very beautiful city. I like it. Now there I used 4, not 1, I used 4 short sentences where I could have used just one sentence, one complex sentence, joining those shorter sentences together with some linking words. Let's look again. Where do you come from? I come from Dublin, which is the capital city of Ireland, and I think a very beautiful city, which I really like. You can see there I'm joining those sentences together using linking words. There I used 2 linking words. I used which twice, and in the middle I had an and. Again, there's lots more linking words that we'll be looking at in a later podcast, and it is especially important and a must in part 3. But again, think of these things. The examiner is listening for that first complex sentence. I come from Beijing, which is the capital of China. I come from Paris, which is the capital city of France and one of the most famous cities in the world. I come from Hoi An, which is a small town in central Vietnam. So you can see making that complex sentence. Important. Now, let's get back. We're going back a little and we're going to look at, as I mentioned before, the examiner is testing and the questions in part 1 are testing your basic grammar skills. So first question for each topic is usually going to be a direct question. If the topic was books, first question probably, do you like reading? Yes, I do. I love reading. I read a book almost every night before I go to sleep. So again, direct question. Do you like? Yes, I do. No, I don't. To start my answer, then giving some more information. Now, next question could be, again, testing your basic grammar. The examiner is going to test your basic past tense. We'll stick with books. What kind of books did you enjoy as a young child? Now, we're testing your past tense. When I was a young child, I used to enjoy reading comic books and storybooks. So you can see the question, when you were a young child, what kind of books did you enjoy? Past tense. The examiner's listening that you can use that past tense without having to stop and think about it. That's important. If you started to answer that question and you make a mistake, if you can very quickly correct it, that's okay. If you can't quickly correct it, keep going. For example, when I was a young child, I used to enjoy reading fairy tales and comic books. So I was able to quickly correct myself. That's okay. But what I don't want to do is start going, that my score is going down, my fluency is going down. So if you can quickly correct a grammar mistake, do it. If not, move on, keep going. So that's the 2 grammar points. First we had direct questions, now we had simple past tense. Now we're going to look at future tense. Again, let's go back to that part 1 topic. What's your major? What are you studying? And the future tense, Would you like to study anything in the future? Again, testing a little bit more complicated because we're also using like a conditional tense, if or would. And again, I would like to study more in the future. I'm actually thinking of doing a master's in e-commerce, which I think would give me more opportunities to find the job of my dreams. So again, we can see basic past tense, basic future tense, and of course present tense. One more thing in Part 1 grammar. Very often there will be a question to test your use of adverbs of frequency. As in, to keep it simple, the question is probably going to be how often, or start with how often. Topic is books. How often do you read? Sports. How often do you play sports? Movies. How often do you watch a movie? And again, it's a very basic grammar thing. I watch a movie at least once a week, sometimes twice. I play sports almost every day. I play basketball 5 times a week. So again, very basic but important. And so that's a quick overview of Part 1. This is just to show you guys what Part 1 is basically designed to do and what the examiner is listening for. Some questions we'll look at what students often ask about Part 1. A common question is, of course, how long should my answer be? Number 1, remember Part 1, we said before, 3 topics, 12 questions, 4 to 5 minutes. It's not very long, so you're not going to have to give long answers. Also, the length of your answer can depend on the question. Let's see, are you a student? Yes, I am. I study e-commerce in university. Now, that's as long as that answer should be. By adding more information to that, it's becoming a bit unnatural, a bit forced, and not so good. Well, let's look at another question. Is there anything you don't enjoy about your studies? Now, this could be a longer answer. Yes, there is. In fact, there's a number of things I don't enjoy about my studies. Firstly, I get a lot of assignments which take up so much of my time, and I spend most evenings at home trying to finish them. I don't even have free time at the weekends. Another thing I really don't enjoy about my studies is there's some very, very difficult parts of the course, usually related to math, which I don't particularly enjoy and find very difficult. So yeah, there are some things I don't enjoy about my studies. Now that's quite a long answer, but you can see there's a lot more information I had to give there. So how long your answer should be depends a lot on the question. But usually in Part 1, we're talking 2 or 3 quick sentences, and that's enough. Again, it's something we can look at a later date or another podcast. Okay, so a quick recap on what we said. Part 1, we have 3 topics. The first topic will be one of 4, work or studies, your hometown, the area you live in, or your home. That will be followed by another 2 topics. Each topic has 4 questions, so in general, Part 1, you're going to get 12 questions inside 4 to 5 minutes. The examiner will introduce each topic. For example, okay, let's talk about sports. Do you like to play sports? Okay, great. Now let's have a look at flowers. Do you like flowers? Do you have any flowers in your home? So you can listen for the examiner to introduce the topics as you move along, so you have an idea of the questions you're going to get and you're some way prepared. And I think for this podcast, we're going to leave that there. I hope you guys found something interesting in there, perhaps something new or something you can work on. If you have any questions on anything I said, or perhaps anything I didn't mention, send me a message and I'll try to get back to you. So that's it for now, and over and out. Have a good day, guys. Goodbye for now.